Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. Ethan had always been a man of principles, even when his heart betrayed him. He believed in boundaries, in promises, and most of all, in staying true to his word. When he married Amelia, it wasn't just a union of love. It was a pact, a quiet promise to honor each other's space, desires, and dreams. But life had a cruel way of testing even the strongest vows. Amelia had a charm that drew people in effortlessly, a warmth in her smile that could light up any room. Yet Ethan had made a promise to himself early in their marriage. No matter what, he would never let his emotions spiral into possessiveness or obsession. He wanted a relationship built on trust, not on control. For months, they lived peacefully, their love understated but deep, like an old melody playing softly in the background of their lives. Then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. Ethan was sitting in his study when he overheard a conversation outside, a hushed, urgent discussion between two men in the park across the street. One of them mentioned Amelia's name, spoken with a dangerous mix of desire and entitlement. Ethan's heart froze. He had never known jealousy like this, never felt the sting of fear that someone could even think of crossing the boundaries he had so carefully respected. He watched as the stranger's intentions became clearer. It wasn't just admiration, it was obsession. The way the man spoke of Amelia sent shivers down Ethan's spine. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that his vow of staying emotionally detached, of giving Amelia freedom, was now in direct conflict with protecting her from someone else's dangerous desire. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The thought of Amelia being at risk gnawed at him relentlessly. His mind replayed the conversation he had overheard, the sharpness of the other man's voice, the way his eyes had lingered, even from a distance. Ethan knew that if he did nothing, he might lose her, not just to someone else's obsession, but to the chaos that could follow if this man acted on his impulses. Ethan's internal struggle was a storm of conflicting emotions. He had always prided himself on self-control, but now every instinct screamed that he needed to act. He began watching over Amelia more carefully, but subtly, without alerting her. Every text she sent, every call she made, every step she took outside seemed to be under his silent surveillance. It wasn't that he didn't trust her. It was that he could not trust the world around her. The tension grew unbearable when Amelia, oblivious to the danger, mentioned meeting a new friend from work for coffee. Ethan's chest tightened. His vow to give her space suddenly felt like a fragile barrier between her and the unknown threat looming nearby. He realized that staying away, keeping his distance, might be exactly what could allow someone else to overstep, and he couldn't let that happen. That evening, he confronted himself in the mirror, repeating the promises he had made at the altar. "I will protect her," he whispered, his voice low but resolute, "even if it means breaking every rule I set for myself." It was the first time he admitted, even to himself, that his vow of detachment had limits. There was a line, and someone else's desire to claim Amelia had drawn it clearly. Ethan's resolve hardened. He would no longer be a passive observer. He would step into the shadows, silent but vigilant, prepared to confront any threat before it could touch her. The very promise he had made, to stay away, was now being tested by a force he could neither ignore nor control. And deep down, he knew that once he crossed this line, there would be no turning back. The next morning, Ethan's demeanor changed subtly. Amelia noticed it, the sharp focus in his eyes, the quiet intensity in his voice. She assumed it was stress from work, but Ethan carried a weight she couldn't see. He had made a silent vow. He would protect her, even if it meant breaking the very promise that had defined his self-discipline. Little did Ethan know, this was only the beginning. The stranger's intentions were more dangerous than he could have imagined, and every move Ethan made to safeguard Amelia would pull him deeper into a web of obsession, desire, and inevitable confrontation. The man he had vowed never to confront directly was already moving closer, and Ethan's quiet world of restraint and patience was about to erupt into chaos. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that danger was lurking just beyond the ordinary rhythm of their lives. Every day, he noticed subtle signs. A car parked a little too long outside their building, a figure that lingered in the distance whenever Amelia went out, even an unfamiliar scent that seemed to follow her. He knew he couldn't let his imagination take over, but something deep inside told him that this threat wasn't imaginary. Someone wanted Amelia, and it wasn't for friendship or admiration. It was for possession. Amelia, as always, remained blissfully unaware of the tension threading through Ethan's life. She moved with her usual warmth and grace, talking about work, friends, and her small joys. Ethan wanted to warn her, to tell her everything, but he hesitated. He didn't want to frighten her unnecessarily, and he also didn't want to reveal that he had been silently watching over her. To do so would mean breaking the careful balance they had maintained in their marriage, the one where she felt free and loved, not constrained. So he stayed in the shadows, quietly observing, quietly protecting. Ethan began to notice patterns in the stranger's movements, how he appeared at certain cafes when Amelia had her lunch break, how his gaze lingered when she left the building, and even how he seemed to know the times she preferred for her morning jogs. Every detail was recorded in Ethan's mind, every potential risk calculated, and yet with each observation, his chest tightened. He realized that staying away had become a dangerous luxury. The world outside their home was no longer benign. It was a place where intentions could collide violently with desires. One evening, Ethan arrived home earlier than usual. Amelia greeted him with a smile that could melt the hardest resolve, unaware that he had been on edge all day. He noticed her laughing at a story she had heard from a colleague, her carefree nature cutting through the tension in the apartment. Ethan wanted to join in her laughter, to let the lightness of her presence soothe him, but he couldn't. He was too aware of the shadow that hovered outside their life, waiting for a moment to strike. The following days became a careful dance. Ethan would walk Amelia to the car in the morning, wait until she was safely inside, and follow discreetly as she drove to work. He began to notice things he had previously overlooked: a man in a dark coat who seemed always a few steps behind her, the way his phone lights flickered suspiciously when she passed, the faint but deliberate gestures as if he were signaling someone else. Ethan's heart raced with a mixture of fear, anger, and protective instinct. He had promised to stay away, but he now realized that promises meant nothing if she was at risk. One afternoon, Amelia invited her coworker, Ryan, to dinner. Ethan immediately recognized the name from office stories but knew nothing about the man personally. It was supposed to be a harmless meal, a friendly gathering. Yet when Ryan arrived, Ethan felt an unexpected tension in the air. The man's eyes lingered a little too long on Amelia, his handshake too firm, his smiles a fraction too calculated. Ethan, who had always valued restraint, felt his pulse quicken. He knew instinctively that Ryan's charm was not entirely innocent, that beneath the polite conversation lay a subtle assertion of desire, a silent claim. Ethan excused himself under the pretense of work, retreating to his study where he could plan his next steps. He realized that remaining passive would only embolden anyone who dared to cross the line. He began researching methods to protect Amelia without revealing his vigilance. He considered security cameras, discreet alarms, and even self-defense training for both of them. But mostly, he thought about how he could intervene if things escalated. Ethan understood that sometimes, love demanded action, even if that action broke the rules he had so carefully followed. That night, sleep was impossible. Ethan lay awake, listening to the soft hum of the city outside, imagining the stranger lurking, imagining a confrontation that he might not control. He thought of Amelia, her laughter, her kindness, and how much he cherished her. And then he thought of the promise he had made, not to interfere unnecessarily, to give her freedom. The irony was bitter. The very vow that had defined his marriage now threatened to become the reason she could be hurt. It was clear to him now. Staying away was no longer an option. The next morning, Ethan noticed subtle changes in Amelia's routine. She left earlier than usual, walked faster, sometimes glanced over her shoulder. It was almost imperceptible, but he saw it. He wondered if she sensed something, an intuition that mirrored his own. She didn't speak of it, though, and he admired her courage and composure. But Ethan knew he couldn't wait for her to act. The situation required him to step forward, carefully, without shattering the trust and calm that formed the core of their relationship. He decided it was time to test the waters. Ethan began engaging Ryan in casual conversation, observing his reactions, trying to gauge the nature of his intentions. At first, Ryan appeared friendly, charming even, with a demeanor that seemed harmless. But Ethan's instincts told him otherwise. There was a calculated confidence in the way Ryan looked at Amelia, a subtle assertion of possession that went beyond normal admiration. Each word, each smile, seemed to carry a hidden weight. Ethan's chest tightened with every interaction, and he realized that protecting Amelia might require confronting Ryan directly, a thought he had resisted until now. Days passed, and the tension escalated. Ethan continued his quiet surveillance while maintaining the appearance of normalcy at home. Amelia, ever cheerful, remained unaware of the storm brewing around her. Ethan caught himself imagining worst-case scenarios, picturing Ryan stepping over boundaries, imagining a confrontation that could spiral out of control. Yet, each scenario reinforced his resolve. He couldn't let anyone threaten Amelia, not emotionally, not physically, not even with the silent weight of desire. By the end of the week, Ethan knew he had to act. He had crossed an internal line he never thought he would, moving from silent observer to protector, from restrained husband to vigilant guardian. The promise to stay away had been made with pure intentions, but life had a way of challenging ideals. And now, standing on the brink of a confrontation he had both feared and anticipated, Ethan understood the truth. Some promises, no matter how sacred, must bend in the face of love and danger. Ethan knew that patience alone would not protect Amelia. The quiet observation, the careful calculations, and the discreet vigilance had reached their limit. Ryan's presence was no longer a distant threat. It had become an active shadow over their lives, creeping into moments that should have been safe, peaceful, and theirs alone. Ethan's chest tightened every time he thought about the way Ryan's eyes lingered a little too long, a subtle predator's gaze that seemed to weigh on Amelia's every movement. It wasn't just desire. It was entitlement, a belief that Amelia could be claimed like an object rather than a person with feelings, choices, and a life built alongside Ethan. That evening, Ethan returned home earlier than usual, hopping to catch Amelia before she left for her yoga class. As he entered the apartment, he noticed the faint hum of her phone vibrating on the counter. Picking it up, he saw a text from Ryan, casual on the surface, but to Ethan it carried an unmistakable undertone. "Can we meet tomorrow? I have something important to tell you." His heart sank. The words were innocent enough if read lightly, but Ethan could feel the subtle pressure beneath them, a push that threatened to disrupt the delicate balance of Amelia's world. He knew he couldn't ignore it. That night he approached Amelia gently. "Did Ryan say anything to you today?" he asked casually, though his voice betrayed his tension. Amelia looked at him, puzzled. "Just the usual work talk. Why? Did I miss something?" Ethan swallowed, realizing that he needed to be careful. He couldn't alarm her unnecessarily, but he also couldn't let her face potential danger alone. "Nothing serious," he said, keeping his tone light. "Just curious about your work friends." Even as he spoke, Ethan's mind was racing. He realized that protecting Amelia would require more than subtle monitoring. It would require him to step into the open, to confront the danger directly. The thought terrified him. He had promised to stay away, to respect boundaries, to let love flourish without fear or possession. And yet, here he was, preparing to do exactly the opposite. Love, he realized, was not passive. It was active, protective, and sometimes ruthless when someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. The next morning, Ethan shadowed Amelia to her office. From a distance, he observed Ryan waiting near the entrance, casually leaning against a pillar, pretending to check his phone. Ethan's stomach knotted. He realized that Ryan was deliberately positioning himself to cross paths with Amelia, to make his presence unavoidable. Ethan felt a surge of anger and resolve. The promise he had made to stay emotionally distant, to respect her independence, was now secondary. Protecting Amelia came first, and he was ready to take action. At work, Ethan waited near the building's entrance under the pretense of running an errand. He saw Ryan approach Amelia, a friendly smile on his face, hands gesturing animatedly. Amelia laughed, unaware of the tension that hung like a storm cloud over the scene. Ethan's pulse quickened. He could feel every ounce of his composure slipping away, replaced by a sharp, focused determination. If Ryan intended to cross boundaries, Ethan would be there to stop it. And he knew, deep down, that this confrontation would change everything. When Ryan tried to guide Amelia toward a quiet corner of the lobby, Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Amelia, let's head this way," he said, placing a gentle but unmistakable hand on her shoulder. Ryan froze, his expression flickering for a moment before regaining its charm. "Oh, Ethan," he said casually, though the tension in his eyes betrayed him. "I was just talking with Amelia about work." Ethan nodded politely but didn't step back. His presence alone was a statement, a quiet but powerful claim that Amelia's safety and comfort were non-negotiable. The subtle confrontation was a turning point. Ryan's demeanor shifted slightly, a hint of respect mixed with lingering desire. Ethan noticed it, storing every detail in his mind. This was no longer about avoidance or restraint. This was about establishing boundaries, about making it clear that Amelia's life, her autonomy, and her choices were not to be tampered with. And Ethan realized that, once he had crossed this line, there would be no returning to the passive, detached husband he had once been. Back at home, Ethan struggled with his emotions. Amelia remained blissfully unaware of the danger she had narrowly avoided, chatting about mundane office stories and weekend plans. Ethan wanted to reach out, to embrace her and tell her how close she had come to a threat, but he held back. He didn't want to burden her, didn't want to taint her world with fear. Instead, he resolved to be even more vigilant, to anticipate every possible move that could put her at risk. Over the next few days, Ethan continued his quiet surveillance, but with a new level of intensity. He followed Amelia at a safe distance when she ran errands, checked in subtly on her schedule, and even adjusted his routines to remain nearby without raising suspicion. Every instinct screamed that the danger was escalating. Ryan's interest, once subtle, had grown more pronounced, a dangerous obsession wrapped in polite conversation and casual gestures. Ethan's internal struggle intensified, but he also felt a strange clarity. The promise to stay away was gone. There was only protection, vigilance, and a readiness to confront whatever came next. Then, one evening, a message arrived that made Ethan's stomach turn. Ryan had invited Amelia to a dinner outside the city, something that seemed casual but carried with it the unmistakable undertone of intention. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't allow her to go alone. But how could he intervene without revealing the depth of his vigilance, without frightening her or appearing controlling? He realized there was only one answer. He had to accompany her, but in a way that appeared normal, casual, harmless. That night, Ethan discussed it with Amelia under the guise of joining her to meet a mutual friend. Amelia agreed, unsuspecting, her excitement at the outing shining through. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just attending a dinner, he was stepping into the arena where desire and danger intersected. Every move he made would be critical. One wrong step, one misjudged gesture, and the carefully maintained balance of their lives could shatter. As they drove to the restaurant, Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of plans, contingencies, and observations. He noticed Ryan's car parked nearby, a casual positioning that revealed far more than he intended. Ethan's pulse quickened. He knew that this dinner was not just about work or casual socializing. It was a test, a subtle assertion of claim that could escalate if left unchecked. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight. Protecting Amelia would require every ounce of courage, every ounce of focus, and a willingness to break the last shreds of his self-imposed restraint. By the time they arrived, Ethan's resolve had hardened into steel. He would not let Ryan cross the line, would not allow anyone to threaten the woman he loved. The promise to stay away had been noble, but it was useless in the face of real danger. Ethan understood now that love required action, vigilance, and sometimes breaking the very rules one set for oneself. And as he walked into the restaurant, side by side with Amelia, he knew that the confrontation he had dreaded was inevitable, and that he would not back down. The restaurant was dimly lit, casting soft shadows across the walls and tables, the kind of place that seemed intimate and safe, but Ethan knew better. As they walked inside, Amelia's laughter filled the space, light and carefree, completely unaware of the tension that Ethan felt coiling inside him like a spring ready to snap. Ryan was already there, seated at a corner table, his posture casual, his eyes sharp, and every movement calculated. He looked up as they approached, smiling warmly at Amelia, but Ethan saw the subtle flicker of challenge in his gaze. Ethan guided Amelia to the table, seating her first, a protective instinct guiding every small gesture. Ryan's charm was on full display, polite words, subtle compliments, casual attentiveness, but Ethan's instincts screamed at him that it was more than politeness. Each of Ryan's glances, each carefully timed smile, seemed like a test of Ethan's patience, a silent attempt to gauge how far he could push without direct confrontation. Ethan remained calm, but beneath the surface, his mind was a whirlwind of strategy. He had promised himself that he would stay away, but that promise had been shattered the moment he realized Amelia's safety and happiness were at stake. As the conversation began, Ethan noticed subtle shifts in Ryan's demeanor. The man's hand brushed against the table too close to Amelia, his foot angled subtly toward her under the table, a predator's choreography masked by civility. Ethan's jaw tightened. Every fiber of his being screamed that he needed to intervene, but he also knew that any overt action could embarrass Amelia or make her uncomfortable. He needed to protect her without drawing attention, to assert boundaries without creating a scene. The balance was delicate, and Ethan was acutely aware that the night could tip into chaos at any moment. Amelia, completely oblivious to the undercurrents, chatted freely with Ryan, asking about his work, sharing stories from her own day. Ethan observed her carefully, noting her gestures, her laughter, and the way her eyes occasionally flicked to him, searching for reassurance. She had no idea that this simple dinner, which she had expected to be casual, was in fact a battlefield of unspoken intentions and protective instincts. Ethan felt a surge of frustration and determination. No one, no matter how charming, had the right to make Amelia feel unsafe or conflicted. As the meal progressed, Ethan subtly repositioned himself. He leaned slightly closer to Amelia, ensuring that any intrusive gestures from Ryan would be blocked by his presence. Ryan's smile remained charming, but Ethan could sense the tension behind it. The man was measuring him, testing the boundaries, probing to see how far he could go. Ethan's hands rested lightly on the table, but every muscle was coiled, ready to react. He realized that this dinner was not just a test, it was a warning. Ryan intended to assert himself, to claim a space that did not belong to him, and Ethan was prepared to prevent it. The first real confrontation came in the form of a subtle comment. Ryan mentioned a trip Amelia had taken recently, making a playful suggestion about how he wished he could have accompanied her. The words were casual, but the undertone was unmistakable. He was claiming proximity, imagining himself in spaces that belonged to Ethan and Amelia alone. Ethan's chest tightened. He felt the familiar heat of protective anger, the kind that forced him to act. Yet he kept his voice calm, his demeanor controlled. "That sounds like quite an adventure," he said, his tone polite but firm. "Amelia seemed to have a great time on her own." The subtle assertion was enough to make Ryan pause, just for a fraction of a second, before his charm returned like a mask. Ethan realized that subtlety alone would not be enough if Ryan continued to push. He needed a plan, a way to establish control without embarrassing Amelia or creating a scene. He decided that the next moment of physical proximity would be decisive. When Ryan reached slightly too close to hand Amelia a menu, Ethan's hand intercepted, guiding the menu toward him, not aggressively, but with an unmistakable firmness. Ryan's eyes flickered, the first real sign of uncertainty he had shown all evening. Ethan maintained eye contact, calm and steady, asserting dominance in a silent, non-violent way. Throughout the dinner, Ethan continued to navigate this delicate dance. He listened carefully, spoke politely, and observed every gesture, every micro-expression. He knew that Ryan was dangerous, not in the sense of open violence, but in the insidious power of desire that ignored boundaries. The man's intentions were clear, his persistence unrelenting, and Ethan understood that if he didn't act decisively, this subtle intrusion could escalate into something far more threatening. As the meal ended, Ryan suggested walking Amelia to her car. Ethan's heart raced. He couldn't allow her to go alone. He placed himself subtly between Ryan and Amelia, offering to escort her. Ryan hesitated, a flash of irritation crossing his face, quickly masked by a polite nod. Ethan could see it, the recognition that his authority was being challenged, that the lines had been drawn. Amelia, unaware of the silent struggle unfolding, thanked Ethan and stepped out with him. Outside, the cool night air contrasted sharply with the heat of Ethan's anger and vigilance. Ryan followed at a distance, his movements casual, but Ethan knew better. Every step was deliberate, a subtle attempt to maintain a presence in Amelia's life. Ethan's mind raced with strategies. He considered driving her, taking an alternate route, even confronting Ryan directly, but he decided on patience. For now, the boundary had been reasserted, but he knew that the danger was not over. Ryan's persistence was like a shadow that refused to fade. Once Amelia was safely inside their car, Ethan allowed himself a brief exhale. He looked at her, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard, and felt a surge of love so intense it was almost painful. He wanted to tell her everything, to warn her of the subtle dangers, but he knew that revealing the full scope of the threat could frighten her unnecessarily. Instead, he resolved to remain vigilant, to protect her silently. And to confront the threat, at the precise moment, it became unavoidable. That night, Ethan lay awake, replaying every gesture, every word, every glance from the dinner. Ryan's desire was no longer a distant concern. It was a present danger, a force that could disrupt their lives if left unchecked. Ethan's mind moved through contingencies, escape routes, and confrontations. He realized that the next encounter with Ryan would not be subtle. It would be decisive, and he would have to break the last shreds of his self-imposed restraint to ensure Amelia's safety. The promise he had made to stay away to give Amelia freedom was now a memory, a relic of an ideal that could not survive in the face of real danger. Ethan understood that love, true love, demanded action, vigilance, and courage. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, his thoughts were singular, clear, and unwavering. He would protect Amelia at all costs, even if it meant crossing the line he had once sworn never to cross. Ethan had reached a point where patience alone would no longer suffice. Ryan's persistence had grown bolder with each encounter, each subtle intrusion into Amelia's life, a test of Ethan's restraint. Every morning, every glance, every whispered message from Ryan felt like a challenge, an unspoken claim on the woman Ethan had vowed to love and protect. And Ethan knew that the next encounter would demand more than subtlety. It would demand confrontation, decisiveness, and the willingness to break the final line of self-imposed restraint he had clung to for so long. Amelia remained blissfully unaware of the escalating tension. She spoke of Ryan casually, noting how he was friendly, helpful, and charming. Ethan forced a calm smile whenever she mentioned him, carefully hiding the storm of emotions roiling inside him. Every word about Ryan felt like a threat, a reminder that there was a man who saw Amelia as something to possess rather than someone to love. The thought made Ethan's jaw tight. He had promised to stay away, to respect boundaries, but that promise now seemed irrelevant. Boundaries meant nothing in the face of danger, and Ethan's love demanded action. The moment came on a quiet Saturday afternoon. Amelia had agreed to meet Ryan for a casual coffee, something she considered harmless. Ethan, however, could not allow it. The idea of leaving her alone with Ryan, even for a brief hour, made his chest tighten with urgency. He suggested running errands in the same neighborhood, citing his own commitments, but in truth, he was shadowing them, observing every step, every subtle gesture. Ryan's posture was relaxed, his charm effortless, but Ethan could sense the tension beneath it, the subtle assertion of desire masked by friendliness. As Amelia and Ryan settled at the cafe, Ethan positioned himself at a nearby table, careful to remain inconspicuous but within sight. He observed Ryan lean slightly closer, offering Amelia a polite but suggestive comment. Ethan's fingers clenched around his coffee cup, knuckles white. The restraint he had held for weeks was fraying. He realized that this was no longer about simple vigilance. This was about actively defending Amelia's space, asserting his presence in the only way that would be understood. When Ryan attempted to guide the conversation toward personal topics, asking about Amelia's routines, plans, and preferences, Ethan decided it was time. He approached the table slowly, calmly, as if by chance positioning himself just beside Amelia. Ryan's smile faltered for the first time, the mask of casual charm slipping slightly. Ethan spoke lightly but firmly. "Amelia, I think we should head out soon. Don't want to miss the rest of our errands." His tone was casual, but the underlying message was clear. Boundaries had been drawn, and Ethan was no longer a passive observer. Ryan's eyes flicked between Ethan and Amelia, a mix of surprise and irritation crossing his features. For a moment, he hesitated, as if recalculating his strategy. Ethan met his gaze evenly, unflinching, projecting a calm authority that left no room for manipulation. The subtle power dynamic had shifted. Ethan understood that protecting Amelia required not just physical presence, but mental dominance, the silent assertion that her space, her choices, and her life belonged to no one but her and him. Amelia glanced between them, sensing an unfamiliar tension in the air. "Everything okay?" she asked innocently. Ethan forced a gentle smile, taking her hand briefly to reassure her. "All good," he said softly, his voice calm but imbued with the unspoken promise of protection. Amelia nodded, satisfied, unaware of the silent battle that had just taken place around her. Ethan felt a surge of both relief and determination. He had crossed the line, yes, but he knew it was necessary. Some promises, he realized, were meant to bend when the stakes were this high. Once they left the cafe, Ethan's protective instincts did not waver. He positioned himself between Amelia and Ryan as they walked toward the parking lot, ensuring that no subtle gesture could threaten her. Ryan trailed behind for a few moments, then gave a polite nod, his face a mask of restrained frustration. Ethan recognized the shift immediately. The man had tested his boundaries and found them firm, unyielding. For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of control in a situation that had seemed increasingly volatile. The ride home was quiet. Amelia chatted casually about work, coffee, and minor weekend plans, completely unaware of the tension Ethan had managed to diffuse. He felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Protecting Amelia, he realized, was far more taxing than he had imagined, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. Every glance, every gesture, every word required attention, vigilance, and calculation. He understood now that his vow of detachment was no longer possible, nor was it desirable. Love demanded presence, intervention, and courage in ways he had never anticipated. That night, Ethan stayed awake long after Amelia had fallen asleep. He replayed the events of the day, analyzing every detail, considering every contingency for the future. Ryan's persistence had been checked, yes, but the danger was far from over. The man's desire was not easily quelled, and Ethan knew that if he let his guard down even briefly, Amelia could once again be at risk. He thought about the lines he had broken, the promise he had made to stay away, and realized that in matters of love and protection, some lines must be crossed. The following week brought no respite. Ryan's attempts to insert himself subtly into Amelia's life continued, though with more caution. Ethan anticipated each move, intercepting conversations, shadowing interactions, and ensuring that Amelia remained unaware of the true extent of the threat. Every day tested his patience and resolve, yet also strengthened his understanding of what it meant to protect someone fully. He had learned that love was not passive. It was active, sometimes messy, and often required difficult choices. One evening, Ethan received a message from Ryan that made his pulse quicken. "Let's meet tonight. I need to discuss something important with Amelia." Ethan knew immediately that this was an escalation, a deliberate challenge. He couldn't ignore it. He informed Amelia casually that they would attend a small work event together, ensuring he would accompany her without arousing suspicion. Inside, his mind raced with plans. Tonight would not be subtle. Tonight, the danger would be confronted head-on. When they arrived at the event, Ryan was already there, his charm in full display, mingling with colleagues and friends. Ethan positioned himself strategically, keeping Amelia close, monitoring Ryan's every movement. The man's gaze occasionally flicked toward Amelia, subtle but unmistakable. Ethan felt the familiar surge of protective anger, a mix of fear, love, and resolve. He knew that patience alone would no longer suffice. It was time to act decisively, to confront the threat and make it clear that Amelia's life, choices, and happiness were non-negotiable. As the evening progressed, Ryan attempted to pull Amelia aside under the guise of a work-related conversation. Ethan followed, stepping beside them seamlessly, a calm but firm presence. "Amelia, let's catch up over here," he said lightly, guiding her away. Ryan's smile faltered for a brief moment, revealing the first crack in his polished facade. Ethan knew he had established the line clearly and irrevocably. He had broken his vow of distance. Yes, But in doing so, he had claimed a space that no one could challenge without consequence. By the time they left, Ethan felt a sense of cautious triumph. Ryan's desire and subtle aggression had been checked, boundaries reinforced, and Amelia remained blissfully unaware of the danger she had narrowly avoided. Ethan, however, knew that the battle was far from over. Protecting Amelia was a continuous effort, a delicate dance of vigilance, strategy, and unwavering resolve. But for the first time, he felt the power of decisive action, the ability to protect, to assert, and to defend the woman he loved at all costs. The night air was heavy with tension as Ethan drove Amelia home from the event. His mind replayed every move Ryan had made over the past weeks, the subtle glances, the almost imperceptible gestures, the persistent attempts to insert himself into Amelia's life. Tonight, Ethan knew, would be the night it all came to a head. He couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. He had to confront the danger directly, once and for all. His vow to stay away had long been broken, and he no longer felt guilt about it. There was only one thing that mattered: Amelia's safety. Amelia sensed the tension, though she didn't fully understand it. "Ethan, are you okay?" she asked softly, her hand brushing against his on the console. He gave her a reassuring smile, hiding the storm inside. "Just tired from the event," he said lightly. In truth, every fiber of his being was focused, alert to every possible move Ryan might make. Ethan had studied the man long enough to understand that charm could hide danger, and subtle aggression could erupt into something far worse if left unchecked. As they pulled into their driveway, Ethan noticed a figure lingering near the street corner, Ryan. He had clearly followed them, and the casual smile on his face did little to hide the intensity in his eyes. Ethan's pulse quickened. This was no longer subtle, no longer a polite assertion. It was bold, aggressive, and threatening. He parked the car calmly, as if nothing were wrong, and guided Amelia to the door, shielding her body subtly as they walked. Ryan's steps quickened to catch up, his smile fixed, but Ethan could see the tension in his jaw, the calculated control that barely contained the desire within him. "You're persistent," Ethan said evenly as they reached the front steps, his tone calm but carrying undeniable authority. Ryan's smile faltered, and for the first time Ethan sensed real hesitation. "I'm just trying to talk," Ryan replied casually, though his voice lacked conviction. Ethan stepped slightly closer, a silent warning. "Some conversations aren't welcome," he said, his gaze steady, unwavering. The line had been drawn, clear and unbreakable, and Ethan felt the weight of his protective vow solidify into something far stronger than words. Amelia looked between them, sensing the tension. "What's happening?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, subtly guiding her inside while maintaining a calm expression. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said softly, though inside, his mind was a whirlwind of strategy. He knew this was the moment when intentions would be tested, when boundaries would either hold or shatter under pressure. He had to act decisively, yet carefully, to ensure Amelia's safety without frightening her. Ryan's smile returned, though it was forced now, tension visible in the stiffness of his posture. "Ethan, I just wanted to talk," he said again, his tone trying to appear casual. Ethan met his gaze evenly. "Talking is fine," he said slowly, "but crossing boundaries is." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. Ryan hesitated, realizing that the subtle game of pursuit he had been playing was no longer possible. Ethan's presence was a shield, a warning, and an assertion of ownership that was both protective and non-negotiable. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Ryan's eyes flicked to Amelia, whose presence had been the reason for every decision Ethan had made in the past weeks. Ethan's pulse raced, but his mind remained clear. He understood that fear, anger, and desire could cloud judgment, but not tonight. Tonight, he would act with precision, strength, and clarity. He would defend the woman he loved at all costs. Ryan made a subtle move forward, testing the line, but Ethan's hand on Amelia's shoulder shifted slightly, a silent but firm barrier. "Stay where you are," Ethan said calmly, his voice low but carrying authority. Ryan froze, the casual charm gone, replaced by frustration and recognition that his pursuit had reached its limit. Ethan could see the subtle shift in his posture, the realization that this game of desire and subtle manipulation had ended. Amelia, unaware of the full stakes, remained calm, trusting Ethan completely, a trust he would honor with every fiber of his being. The confrontation did not escalate into violence, but the tension was palpable. Ethan's presence, steady and unwavering, communicated everything Ryan needed to understand. There would be no further intrusion, no subtle claims, no manipulations. Ethan's resolve was absolute. He had crossed every personal boundary to protect Amelia, and in doing so, he had established an unbreakable shield around her, one that Ryan could no longer test. After a few moments, Ryan nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement of defeat. "Fine," he said quietly, his smile gone, replaced by a forced neutrality. Ethan remained calm, maintaining the protective posture that had ensured Amelia's safety throughout the encounter. The man turned away, fading into the night, and Ethan finally allowed himself a small exhale. The threat had been neutralized, boundaries reinforced, and Amelia remained safe, unaware of the danger she had narrowly avoided. Once the coast was clear, Ethan guided Amelia inside. She looked up at him, still smiling, completely unaware of the silent battle that had just concluded outside their home. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft, trusting. Ethan smiled back, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "All good," he said simply, though inside, he felt a surge of relief and triumph. Protecting her had required breaking promises, crossing lines, and confronting fear, but it had been worth it. Amelia's safety, her happiness, and her trust were priceless. That night, Ethan lay awake beside Amelia, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The man who had tried to claim her attention and affection was gone, at least for now, and the line between patience and action had been drawn clearly. Ethan understood that love was not always about restraint. It was about vigilance, courage, and the willingness to act when danger threatened the ones you care about most. He had broken his vow to stay away, but in doing so, he had honored the deeper promise he had made at their wedding, to protect, cherish, and defend Amelia with everything he had. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Amelia continued her routine, blissfully unaware of the events that had threatened to disrupt her world. Ethan remained attentive but not intrusive, balancing vigilance with the freedom and trust she deserved. The experience had changed him. He knew now that love required not just affection, but courage, decisiveness, and the ability to confront threats head-on. He had crossed the line he had once sworn never to cross, and in doing so, he had discovered the true depth of his devotion. Ethan realized that some vows, while noble, were meant to bend in the face of danger. His promise to stay away had been a testament to restraint, but love demanded more than restraint. It demanded action, protection, and sometimes difficult choices. And as he held Amelia close that night, watching her sleep peacefully, he understood that the man he had been, reserved, cautious, patient, had evolved into someone capable of anything to ensure her safety. For Ethan, the lesson was clear. Love was not passive. It required vigilance, courage, and the willingness to break rules when the stakes were this high. And as he drifted into a quiet, vigilant sleep, he vowed silently that no one, no desire, no threat, no obsession would ever endanger the woman he loved. The promise to stay away had ended, but a deeper promise, to protect, cherish, and defend Amelia at all costs, would remain unbroken forever.